be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep open-minded conversation. I'm the one they call Shayn, and before we get into today's episode, I just want to take a moment to reinstate what the mission is exactly of this podcast. And the mission of this podcast is to introduce a variety of different views, opinions, ideas, philosophies, experiences, and research in the hopes to gain multiple perspectives in an attempt to understand this reality. Hence the name, Inquiries of Our Reality. That said, it's been a long time since I've had a geopolitical episode, but as I mentioned on a few previous shows, I'd like to re-expand the conversation being had on the show to bring it back to its roots. So today for you guys, I have the return of one of my favorite guests to talk politics with. But first, I have a few exciting news and updates. First and foremost, Bizarre Inquiries will now become a YouTube live show. I will, of course, give you guys a bit of a heads up when that's going to go live, but the format for that is also going to be changing a little bit. It'll probably be a once-a-month show, probably, and it will also run about an hour instead of 15 minutes. And like I said, it will be a live show, so you guys can hop in, you guys can give your opinions on all the different things that we're talking about. And if you guys want to contribute to that show, before we get the ball rolling, where all you guys start becoming a community around that show, you guys can also send in articles, clips, or questions, anything that you guys want to see us discuss on the show. And it looks like going forward with that also, we'll probably have some guests pop on. So that being said, also it'll have even more questions and stuff being brought in. But I think that'll probably be the best direction for that show. So hopefully you guys end up enjoying it being a live show. And of course, with it being a live show, I will still end up dropping the audio versions of it on the normal feed. So anybody that's been listening that way, you guys will still be able to do that. And again, it'll be hour-long episodes this time. And talking about lives, of course, Patreon lives are back for anybody that didn't catch it on the last couple episodes. And that is live access to this show, and it's live access to Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin. So if anybody might be interested in that, definitely go and check out the Patreon. And in addition to that, of course, the premium live replays of the shows will be back, of course, too. Depending on which tier you pick, there's been some switching around with some benefits and everything. So if you're currently a Patreon member, make sure you guys go and check those out. You know what your current tier is offering. And on top of that, if anybody else has any suggestions to continue growing the Patreon, I'm all ears, and I would absolutely love to hear what you guys would love to see over there. And the only way I can make it exactly what you guys want is if you guys give me your opinions. So, don't be scared. Shoot me a message any way that you guys can get a hold of me, and I would absolutely love to hear it. And last thing, it's been, I believe, almost a year since I've gotten a typed out review on iTunes. So I'd love to be able to read some of those on the show. Hopefully you guys can get back in the swing of that again. Like I said, it's been a while. I still see the star reviews coming in, but it's just been a while since anything got typed out. And if anybody wouldn't mind leaving one, I would greatly appreciate it. And one last thing, just a quick message. This podcast has a strong focus on community engagement, so I encourage all listeners to share their own experiences and research on the show. That said, if anyone would like to be a guest on the show, or if anyone has an encounter or experience that they would like to share on the show, or possibly even have me investigate, you guys can get a hold of me through email, which is inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys can text or call the hotline, and that number is 313-364-1551. And you guys can also get a hold of me through social media. You guys can also get a hold of me through the submission form. Any way that you guys want to get a hold of me, you guys are more than welcome to do so. And every single thing that I mentioned is all available on the link tree, which is available down in the show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show the guy behind Macroaggressions, the mind behind the octopus of global control. And now for the fourth time returning to the show, one of my personal favorite podcasters. Please welcome to the show, the legendary Charlie Robinson.
It's good to be back. What's new?
Oh man, there's a lot of new stuff going on since last time we talked. I think the last episode you were on was like 140, and now we're up to 289. So there's a lot that's happened in that period since last time you were on the show, man.
Yeah, there's a lot that's happened just in the last week. It seems like. So, yeah, it's hard to know where to start too. It's been such a crazy time the last year. We've seen our beloved Orange Jesus get shot at multiple times. Or once and maybe almost a second time. I don't know. Or maybe they shot at him the second time. I don't know. We had that whole clown show of Kamala coming out and spreading joy. We had the Biden fiasco of just being himself and old and decrepit, and then
Daddy Long Legs on the side of him too.
Yeah, and then what we've seen in the last week or so with the starting on January 1st. So it seems like 2025 is gonna be wild, I think.
Dude, according to all these news sources, everything's about to hit as soon as Trump hits office because everybody's saying the 21st, the 21st, the 21st. Like, I don't know if they're trying to set people up to already think that there's going to be disaster and in turn there will be, or if they're purposely waiting to push some stuff through until he's in office so that it's all a game, man. Like, whether you're for Trump, against Trump, whatever, man, there is definitely a bunch of different moving pieces that are all happening right now. And I don't know if it's the sides working against each other, or if they're all working together and finding a way to kind of come together, but there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, a lot of the competing crime families that are fighting for power and position, and I think the animosity towards Donald Trump is authentic. I think these people genuinely despise him. I don't think that they're making that up. But this is what happens in DC. A lot of people, especially when you get to the point where there's a changeover in power, there's a lot of there's a lot of people coming in to the new administration and a lot of people going. And out of the Biden administration, what you'll have is a bunch of people that are recycling back into the Trilateral Commission, which they had to put their memberships on ice in order to go into the administration. So you've got Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken and Susan Rice, who will leave the Biden administration and then take a walk across the street, go into the Trilateral Commission, put their names back up on the headboards there, and now they're back in it and pushing for their ultimate goal of world government, but more importantly, open borders first and foremost. And so as they leave, now the topic starts to turn to, why don't we just take Canada? Why don't we take Mexico and maybe even Greenland while we're at it now? And you go, wait a second. That sounds like these trilaterals are going to go back to their office and they're going to say, we don't even need to send a new batch. Trump's taking care of all that for us.
Dude, that's kind of been the hard part with the whole Trump thing, because it's like, it seems like most of America, they want to get behind Trump because he's like anti-woke agenda, anti all this type of stuff. But on the other side, man, it's like, is it purposely some kind of ploy that's been set up in order to kind of like bring out like the quote Christian extremists, or push people into being Christian extremists so that they can flip that and turn that into something else? Because you look into a bunch of these like premonitions of what's going to happen for like World War III, and they all bring back the topic that it's going to be some type of like a holy war. So in turn, it's like you got to get the Christians involved. So you got to amp them up somehow. So like, is all of this stuff just intended to be just a giant movement of the pieces amongst the giant world board that is the chess game? Like, who knows, man?
Yeah, I mean, it helps if you've got, in order to get the right to agree to all of this, you've got to bring in Trump, and it's got to be his idea. Now, if the Kamala Harris regime had been installed and they were pushing for biometrics in order to secure people through the border, the Republican side, the people who would vote for Trump, would be up in arms about that. But you watch as he becomes president and starts to say, I'm going to clean up this border situation. I'm going to deport all these dirty illegals out of this country, but we're going to need biometrics, right? And they're going to say, yeah, that's right. We'll get them all out of here. And let's bring on the biometrics. So if you want to pass something that is absolutely a catastrophe for the Republicans, you've got to get their guy to push it, to have to be the sales pitch for it, because otherwise they won't go for it. But if this had been offered by the by the Biden-Harris group, there would be no appetite for any sort of biometric track and trace surveillance program. But you can feel the problem, reaction, solution kind of working itself out right now, right? You can feel like the problem, we've got too many people coming across the border. Reaction, oh my God, do something, get rid of all these people. Solution, well, the only way we can really take care of this situation is we've got to know who these people are and prevent them from ever getting back in. So we need to scan their eyeballs and scan their thumbs and scan their buttholes and put them on a list and then send them back wherever. But now we're going to have, and it's only going to be for them. I mean, we're only going to do this with these dirty illegals that have come in, right? And that's the only way this surveillance is going to be for. And then 3 years go by, and then the next thing you know, it's part of what you need to do to renew your passport, and it's part of your internet ID card that they'll roll out. Again, you could be a dirty illegal online, right? And then this will be the sales pitch. And so you can see how they'll back us into this technocracy. And so I've described the presidential selection process as being sort of a choose your own adventure book. And if Kamala had been installed, we would have had, 100 more genders and a lot more wokeism and tranny story time at every day instead of just on Saturdays. And it would have been a disaster. But since that didn't happen and we've gone the other way, we can take solace knowing that the woke agenda is dying and that is sort of gone away. But unfortunately, we've now got a new adventure, which is technocracy. And that's the J.D. Vance, Eric Schmidt, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Palantir group that is pushing forward with what will probably be way worse than tranny story time, which is internet ID cards, track and trace surveillance systems, biometric data gathering, and ultimately some form of social credit score, which has been currently talked about and been rolling out on X with Elon talking about giving everybody a social credit score on there. So you can sort of see it playing out right now. So I'm glad we don't have the woke component to this. That was really annoying and super dangerous for kids, of course, but it's not like we're out of the woods. We just have a new set of problems that we're going to have to deal with.
Honestly, I started getting skeptical as soon as Elon Musk started getting involved, because I've always had my questions about this guy to begin with. And I mean, you got the whole thing going on in Canada right now where you have all these people that are coming in from India and they're all the ones with the low IQs. And there's this whole diversion of mixing up the culture within Canada currently. But now with the whole thing coming on with Elon Musk, they're talking about the whole thing of bringing in top talent as far as tech goes, which assumably is going to be, again, people from India, because those are the people that are working on this type of stuff. So now are we going to end up with this class system within Canada and the United States that the higher class of the Indian culture is going to be in the United States, and then the lower class of the Indian culture is going to be in Canada, and we're basically just going to keep shifting the population around, but we're doing it under a different facade now because they got everybody going that we're going to stop immigration, but now they're bringing people in for tech. So now it's you're either picking between the weird woke future or you're picking between this tech future where you're going to have to worry soon enough about them making it mandatory to have to put this Neuralink in the back of your neck at some point, I'm sure, to be able to scan you going across borders, to be able to track where you're going, or make sure you're being carbon friendly.
Yeah, of course. It's India's new digital caste system where they separate you by your programming skills, those who have them and those who don't have them. It's funny that the H-1B visa has been topic of conversation because it was rolled out in 1990. So it's not like it's brand new. It's funny that they got everybody sort of talking about this and distracted about this. I feel the same way you do about Elon Musk. I don't trust the guy. He seems like he's herding everyone into this dystopian future.
He wants to be in control of everything.
The X app, the everything app. He talked about it being like WeChat, and it's well, that's not a good thing. You shouldn't be pushing it like it's the Chinese social networking / social credit system, dystopian hellscape app. I don't think I would sell it like that, where your money is tied to it. They can shut it off if you say the wrong thing online. I don't like that at all. I mean, we're already having problems with PayPal and groups like that, which of course he was co-founder of.
It was part of.
Where they'll shut off your account. I was talking to the previous owner of Activist Post about this because I was setting up payment systems and asking them, hey, do you guys have problems when you're doing this? Do you ever have problems with PayPal or, and he said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, let me tell you, we had such a problem with PayPal. They didn't just nuke our account. They nuked our account. They nuked my wife's account. They nuked my partner's account. They nuked my partner's wife's account. They nuked everybody's PayPal account that was even one hop away from Activist Post, who was just republishing articles. And so PayPal has most definitely has authoritarian leanings, as we've noticed, and they will shut you off. And so the idea that you're going to have some sort of X app and everything app where your money is tied to it, that sounds convenient if you're just some normie who wants to go to Starbucks and buy a coffee with your Twitter account, right? But it's something totally different when it's weaponized against you, and all of a sudden everything that you say online is feeding into some algorithm, and it's making a calculation on whether you're a good person or not. And if it thinks that you're on the wrong side of humanity, can decide to turn your money off, then you can. I mean, we're now in a Black Mirror situation where you can imagine the sort of chaos that comes with that. And on top of that, I would suggest that the most devious form of censorship is self-censorship. So if you know that that's possible, that it might turn off your money, if you say the wrong thing, you're going to be more than likely not saying the things that might get you thrown off. So again, you're going to censor yourself. And I don't know how you quantify something like that. What does that do to you? The things that you might have said or would have said. If only I was going to say, it's like going back to school. I was going to say something, but to that bully, but he would have hit me in the face. So I didn't say it, and now now I feel bad. I lived the rest of my life feeling bad about myself because I was silenced by fear. Well, you're going to be silenced by fear in this new reality too. The fear of having your entire world switched off just for having an opinion that's unpopular these days.
I was going to say, and if it isn't enough for that, I mean, you got all these social justice warriors out here that anytime you open your mouth, there's always an issue. And this is one thing that I've talked about left and right, man, is that it's you have one person that has that ideology in a group of people, and it kind of ruins it for everybody, where nobody feels like they're allowed to say anything because they're going to have this person come back and bark at them. But if you put them in the flip side of everything, if you put, them on the reverse side of it, it's nobody on the other side is going to give them shit for their opinion. They may argue with them about it, but they're not going to completely try to shut them down and basically start name calling them to try to give their opinion, make them stop giving their opinion. The people that are turning into these social justice warriors are the people that used to have temper tantrums as children, and now nobody ever taught them that that's not how you act in normal society. So they think that's what you do to get things done. So instead of having a normal civil conversation actually get somewhere, instead these people will just sit here and scream at you and start calling you names and just completely shut off from hearing any valid point that you try to make towards them. It's crazy.
It is crazy. And I've had interactions with people like that. And I know I'll notice, halfway through the conversation, I'm thinking to myself, I'm not even talking to this person. I'm talking to Rachel Maddow. I'm talking to whoever this person was watching on TV last night, because their views of the world are so disjointed. And if I step in and offer a contradictory opinion about it, which is based on facts and logic and reason and research and all those things, that's just not welcome in their world. I've had this with family members who you just have to make a calculation at some point, okay, this is not somebody I'm going to be engaging with because time is short. I don't have time. I'm not going to change this person's mind. They're not listening to me. They don't want to listen to me. They're looking for confirmation that their belief system is correct. And in the absence of facts, they go to feelings. It's this is how I feel about the situation. I feel like this is wrong. I feel like it's well, wait a second. Hang on a second. I don't care what you feel. Here are the facts of the case. Here's what's actually going on. Your feelings are irrelevant in the face of facts. And that's why it's tough to have these conversations with people. I mean, we just came out of the holidays, right? So people are at Christmas with their families, or New Year's with their family, or Thanksgiving with their families. And they have these conversations with people, and they get into these arguments or debates about topics. And it's you can tell when somebody doesn't have facts to bolster their case because they just go off of feelings. And that is they somehow believe that trumps reality, that somehow, no, it shouldn't be this way, so therefore it isn't this way. It's like, you're delusional if you think that. I mean, I won't argue with people anymore that just are allergic to facts because it doesn't get you anywhere. I know how I feel about things. I mean, if we were talking about how do I feel about a certain event, I might have a different opinion. But here are the facts of it. And the facts don't care about your feelings. And by the way, if you had facts, you would bring them to the argument. But you don't have facts, therefore the only thing you have is feelings. And that's very tough to sort of argue against, because you're arguing with somebody whose belief system is not anchored in reality.
I mean, even on another flip side of this, man, I feel like some of those people too are some of the people that they kind of grew up in the age with all like the anti-bullying stuff. So in turn, they never learned how to have like thick skin, how to actually be able to like take a punch and give something back. Instead, they just completely shut down. So like everybody wants to be anti-bully. And I'm not saying like bully a kid to the point where like he's going to end up trying to like kill himself or something, but there needs to be a little bit of resistance here and there. Otherwise, people again never learn how to develop having tough skin, and in turn actually being able to have a conversation with somebody, even if it gets heated. Instead, they just get to that instant shutdown mode. Like sometimes that kind of stuff is a necessity, because if you're not like correcting people kind of back into how society functions, then what happens? They go scattering off into a million different directions, and everybody's confused, and nobody knows what's going on, and nobody knows left from right anymore. Just everybody turns into chaos. And then at chaos, I mean, maybe that's what they're intending, because within chaos is where you can start kind of grasping for power. Hold on tight, everyone. Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break. But if you don't mind taking a second to follow Inquiries of Our Reality on Instagram and Facebook, and Open Minds Media on YouTube and TikTok, I'd greatly appreciate it. And feel free to spark up a conversation. I love getting to know you guys. And now back to the show.
You haven't been stuffed in a locker, lady, and it shows.
You've been hit in the face, my friend, and it really shows.
Yeah, there's something to be said for running your... See, it's all fun and games when you're running your mouth online, but when you see a person in real life, do you have the tenacity to say it to their face? But yeah, it's the generation now, they haven't had to work out those debates. They haven't had to work out their arguments because they're stuck in their safe space, because they can't have a debate because it makes them feel all icky inside when somebody calls out their bullshit right to their face in a logical, rational, fact-based way. They don't like that. So instead they just pretend that, they're not going to engage in that. They're going to hide out. And I agree with you. You need to have those conversations, and you need to have those, interactions with people to toughen you up, to give you a little bit of practice dealing with that. If you don't have any of that as a kid, and then you go to college, and college is supposed to prepare you for the world outside of that. But the college is enabling you by giving you a safe space and telling you that, yeah, you can just write anonymous emails about your teachers if they say a word that makes you feel all icky inside, and we can get them fired. It's no problem. We'll just run them out of the school and everything. And then you get out into the real world and you pull that shit with your boss, and your boss is like, excuse me, we're not doing any of this. Like, who do you think you are? You're going to come in here and you're going to tell me, oh, you heard a microaggression at work, and so you want to file a complaint? Like, get back to your office and get to work. You know what I mean? And so there's a softness about this that has been enabled by the school systems and by society, and the university system is a disaster too. I mean, I if I had to do it all over again these days, I wouldn't go to college. I mean, it wasn't like that when I was in school. I wouldn't have fit in, and I wouldn't have stayed. But these days, I feel, I have a teenage daughter, and I'm thinking about this, like, all right, when she gets to college age, it's like, that used to be like, oh, well, that's the goal. You got to get to college. And it's like, it depends on the school. Like, I don't want her to come back with, green hair and, and a
septum ring.
Right. After a year of a fine arts degree, 17th century women's literature. What are we paying for here? So I think that it's changed a lot. And this generation has become quite soft as a result of it, and the word is out too, because you're starting to hear from people who own companies that are saying, I won't there's a certain demographic of society that I just won't hire, not because I don't think they can do the job, but because I don't need the headache that comes along with employing these people who think that they are above reproach and that nobody can question them about their talent or work ethic or the way they're doing their job. And if we do, I'm worried that I'll get a lawsuit or I'll get some sort of sexual harassment issue that's just made up out of the blue. And so all these employers are having to really start to think about like, who do we want to hire here? Do they have the right mindset, and are they out of this generation that expects everything to be handed to them and throws a fit when it's not?
Man, and then even on top of that too, you even have the people that have to take like the mental health days, and everybody needs a day off here and there. Like, that's one thing. Like, everybody needs a day to sit down, they need to relax, get their head straight, like whatever. But when you have this group of society where it's like every other week they have to take a day off of work to take a mental health day, like it gets to a ridiculous point where now the business can't function itself, and everybody within the business is getting irritated because they're carrying that other person's weight when they're not there and they disappear for a while. And then on the other side, it's like you can't even question them about it when they come back to it, because then even the companies have to fear that they're going to try to flip it on them and take some type of like legal action where they were trying to like pry into like their medical business and this and that. Like, it's gotten to a point where it's like we're almost putting certain aspects of society completely on halt for somebody that needs to have like a moment to have like a temper tantrum. And like I said, it's like if you need to take a day off here and there just to like get your head straight, like relax, like that's one thing. But if you're gone once a week, every other week to take a mental health day, that's like a totally different thing. That's like at that point you're almost working a part-time schedule. So again, like why even have that person work there in the first place?
Yeah, that would not fly with me. I would be extremely intolerant of something like that. And of course, nowadays, like you said, you'd be worried that you'd get sued for prying into somebody's HIPAA records. Like, well, you said you took a mental health day. You look fine to me. What's wrong with you? Like, well, you can't ask me what's wrong with me. Well, I can ask you what's wrong with you because you don't show up to work anymore. Because you have got this invisible illness, this invisible affliction that's it just always. Does it hit you on Saturdays and Sundays, or is it only Monday through Fridays when you have these mental health needs? So I would find myself being extremely intolerant of something like that, because I think it's kind of like, I don't remember ever having the option to take there was no such thing as a mental health day. I could have used one probably, now that I think of it, with some of the jobs I had, but I never even considered it to be an option other than just you get up and you go. And also I worked for a very long time in fields that are in real estate that are 100% commission. So if you have a mental health day, it's called not making any money as well. And so if you can make that calculation as best as you can, how you're going to run your own business and how you're going to manage your time. And if it's something where you just can't seem to get off the couch in the morning to get up and go to work, well, if you work in real estate, you're going to find out that that's not going to work very well for you. You will slowly starve to death when you don't make enough money to pay your bills. So you better find that mental strength that you've got hidden in there and tap into it in order to get your ass to work, or else you're going to be in big trouble. But of course, if you're making $175,000 a year as a project manager at Facebook, and your day involves getting cappuccinos and going to yoga after lunch, then you probably have such a soft setup that anything is going to be enough to put you into a tailspin. So I just don't have a whole lot of respect for this batch that are taking these made up jobs, and even those aren't good enough to keep them showing up every day and clocking in at the office.
Honestly, man, do you think this stuff is actually starting to somewhat die out? Because it seems like at least it's not getting pushed as much within the media. But the media, it seems like they've kind of gotten to a point where it's just constant event after event after event after event. So it's almost just like giving people like whiplash essentially from all these different things, and people aren't able to actually like dig into these things. But on the other side of the spectrum though, after Kamala ended up not winning the presidential election, and all of these like liberal people kind of started doing this weird like flip-flop thing where either one, they like went apeshit crazy, or on the other side, they just kind of like disappeared into like obscurity, and like half these people just like vanish, and now you're not even like hearing from them anymore. Like, do you think this thing's actually dying out, or do you think it's just part of the game, part of the facade, part of just the movement of what they're trying to push through the media?
It's the ebb and flow of these presidential cycles. One door closes, another one opens, and it's fun to watch the leftists freak out and scream at the sky because Trump won again, and they talk about how they're going to move to the moon and whatever. It's hilarious because that. They don't typically have a very good understanding of the world in which we live in to begin with. So whenever I watch them have breakdowns, it's funny. I feel like there's a seismic shift though with Trump coming in, and I'm not a red team versus blue team guy, as you know, but there's a change in tone and attitude and outlook for sure for 2025, at least from a business standpoint. I would say that if you're somebody who runs one of these businesses that has to hire these woke retards to work there, at least now you are looking out into the future and you're thinking, all right, well, I can plan a little bit better. I know that things from an economic standpoint, from a business regulation standpoint, if you're in an industry that's heavily regulated, you know that there's going to be at least a little bit more sanity injected into it, if for no other reason than just because Trump wants to get credit for making the economy, take off and have great things. So cut regulations, cut some of this wokeness. If you're a business owner, you're going, okay, now I can forecast out a couple years. Now I'll make a decision about whether or not I want to spend money and grow and hire more people and do all this. In a Biden, the last 4 years with Biden and the potential 4 years with Kamala Harris, how in the world, I'm a business owner myself, but how can you take a look at that environment and make any sort of extrapolations about what the future is going to look like, except to say that I assume the future is going to be worse because there's going to be more regulations, there's going to be more taxation. I mean, it might not happen if Kamala gets in that they actually tax unrealized capital gains, but the fact that she's so dumb that she threw that out as a potential option makes me think, holy moly, like she might not pull that off, but she's going to do something that's equally as detrimental to my business. So those people are now probably feeling a lot better about the situation that now that Trump's in there, because they've got at least somebody who's built something, and he has a track record of running businesses, and he knows what it's like to get things done. He's got a track record of getting things done. He's getting buildings built, getting projects accomplished, and getting them across the finish line. Kamala Harris had a track record of doing none of those things. I mean, she's never accomplished anything that didn't involve her on her knees, working her way to the top. So there's no respect for anything like that. So I think in that regard, that things feel like they're changing a bit, in that hopefully there's going to be some people that can take a look at the situation and go, okay, well, I might not have a crystal ball that I can see everything that's coming, but I do have a pretty good idea that the business environment is going to be a lot better moving forward, because we've got somebody in there who prioritizes that. And at least we're not going to have tranny story time anymore. And that's a good thing as well. And so you take your victories where you can get them. But, Donald Trump will usher in technocracy. And so that's a huge problem as well. So you have to understand that, like, it's not going to all be great. But if you see some benefits here and there, grab them and just bank them, because if he's going to make the other business owners out there feel optimistic, then that optimism is contagious, and then it's reflected in the way they spend money and the way they hire, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in some regards. So couple that with some tax cuts and some removal of regulations, and maybe opening up some industries that were dormant, or kicking Bitcoin into high gear in the United States. Maybe that's something that they do, opening up oil and gas a little bit more. That starts to kick the economy into high gear. Next thing you know, people start to feel it, and they start to act accordingly. So if you can convince people that things are changing, then you can hopefully get them to a point where they're starting to behave in a way that's more beneficial towards actually making the economy run better. And then as a result, everyone's attitudes will start to feel a little bit better. If you got a little extra money in your pocket, you feel a little bit better about society. But when you've got the Bidenomic component and everything is inflating 30% a year, it's really hard to feel good about the situation that you're in.
I mean, regardless of who's in office, I mean, I always say as long as there's a Republican in office, gas is always going to be cheaper. So, I mean, that's like one perk to it no matter what that you'll always get. That's at least a little bit of money in your pocket at the end of the week. But diving into like the whole political scheme of everything, I want to know kind of where your opinion is on where you think these truck scenarios are fitting in. Because, of course, everybody's talking about the Cybertruck in front of the Trump Tower in Vegas. I believe that was in Vegas. And then they're also talking about the truck that was driving around in New Orleans and drove through some people. But on top of that, I don't know if you've dug too much into it, but there was also one that happened, I believe, over in the UK, and it was on Christmas, where some dude drove a truck through a crowd and hit a bunch of people at some like Christmas festival over in the UK.
It was in Germany.
Oh, in Germany. Yep, that's where it was.
Yep.
So there seems to be something weird going on with these trucks. Like, it's on the other side of the world, but I still think that there is some kind of common link between all of these things, and it's playing into this like political scheme.
Well, I'll tell you my guess on this is that it is NATO, and that this is Operation Gladio, America style, 2025. And I'll tell you the reason why I thought that. The first time it crossed my mind that that's what this was when I saw the picture of the Cybertruck on fire, and right next to it is the Trump logo, the Trump Hotel logo. And it was framed perfectly. And I took one look at that and I said, that's Operation Gladio. That's the strategy of tension. They take a lot of care in getting the setting right. It's like a movie set. And Ole Damigard talks about this. He talks about the traveling road show, the rock star traveling rock band of NATO false flag teams that go from military base to military base, traveling the world, setting these things up and then making it happen. And one of the ways that you can tell that they're involved is by the photography. If you see a picture of a bunch of shoes, that's the front page of the LA Times, a bunch of shoes, there's been a shooting, whatever. That triggers an emotion in somebody that those shoes used to have feet in them. Children used to be wearing those shoes or riding those bikes. It's shoes and bikes. Those are the things that you see quite a bit. A picture of a bike just on the ground. It's like, oh, a kid would have been riding that bike, but now he's dead because of this shooting or this mass murder or whatever it is. This is stagecraft. This is being done to create a strategy of tension. That is the term that they used in Gladio in Europe in the 60s and 70s was that it's not even so much that you need to have a concise agenda behind this. It's not like there's a you have to leave a manifesto saying that this is what it's about. It works if it's random. It works just as well, maybe even better, if it's random violence that could happen here or there. Now, obviously, if it's at Trump International Hotel in Vegas, that's a very specific place. But the idea that a truck could be driving down the street in New Orleans, and I mean, I've been on that street. I've been right where all those people got hit. That it could happen that somebody could just run random people over in New Orleans or wherever. That's a tactic that they brought forth in Gladio in the 60s when they would shoot up grocery stores in Belgium or set off bombs in the Bologna train station or set off car bombs here and there. What they were doing was they were creating chaos and fear and making everybody feel very uncomfortable about the situation and creating tension. And when it came time to vote on certain events, they would set off bombs to push public opinion one way or another. And so this is I did a show in 2024 about Operation Gladio America style. I did one in 2022 about it as well. You can see the fingerprints of NATO all over this, and that's what I think is happening.
Hold on tight, guys. We have to take a break and pay some bills. But if you guys don't like hearing the ads, then I have a solution for you. You guys can get ad-free and early access to this show and Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin on the Open Minds Media Patreon for just $1 a month. And it's a great way to support this show and all the hard work behind it. And if you're interested in merch store discounts, live access to episodes, or premium video versions of episodes, then there are a few other tiers with additional benefits with 7-day free trials available. And we are back, so let's hop right in. Do you think there also might be a ploy that's kind of mixed in with both of these that I don't know for sure if both of the cars, besides the Cybertruck, were gas vehicles or electric vehicles, but I've been kind of wondering if there's this whole ploy that they're basically trying to say, like, these gas vehicles aren't safe, we can't regulate them, we can't control them, but they also, on another side, blew up the Cybertruck to show that if it blows up upward. Nobody around it's really getting hit by anything. So we could easily safe fit vehicles with exploding devices. So if anybody ever tries to run through a crowd, we can blow that car up. Everybody's safe. This thing's going to explode up. Like, I've been kind of curious if it's somewhat of a ploy that they're trying to kind of push Elon Musk's agenda as far as, you know, getting more of these electric vehicles on the road and trying to say that these are like the safer option for people. Because again, even in an explosion, it'll explode up. It won't hurt the people around it. So if we have to put bombs in these cars to make sure you're safe, we can do that.
You've heard of guerrilla marketing. This is guerrilla warfare marketing. This is setting off bombs in Teslas in order to brand Tesla. You know, it's the truck that doesn't totally blow up the way you'd think it would. You know, Elon was out right afterwards saying, yeah, look at this. The car didn't blow up. See, it protected everybody. And you're like, oh my God. I could, of course, it's never just one agenda. Mm-mm. It's always layered in. There's always a variety of things going on. So why set off one false flag event with one mission when you can demonize a bunch of people? That's why, you know, it's like, oh, he shot up all these innocent people, and he had a bump stock, and he had an extended magazine, and he had a silencer on it. And it's like, no. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get a 4-for-1 with this. You want to ban guns. You want to ban the bump stocks. You throw everything at it. Oh, he had a manifesto. He was talking about how he hated the Jews. It's like, okay, well, we can put anti-Semitism on here too. Like, what else can we put in there? Oh, he hated Trump. Let's put that in there too. So there's always a manifesto. As soon as I heard manifesto on this, I just started laughing. I said, you guys, I mean, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but like, you need to hire better writers. Because the crime scene, the crime scene that journalist went through, and it was going through all of this, and it's like, this is the bomb making factory over here. He had a Quran. It was flipped to this particular passage. It's like, okay, first of all, I saw this movie already. It's called the San Bernardino shooting. Okay. Second of all, how dumb do you think the audience is? They hate your guts and think you're stupid. And maybe most of the audience is stupid, but we see it, and we just, I posted, that video on Twitter. I retweeted it, and I said, I'm embarrassed on their behalf because they clearly can't see this insane story for what it is. I mean, it's so disjointed that they would allow the media to just go ransack this guy's house and be in there. In this reporter, air quotes, who has Unit 8200 IDF ties and is doing her investigative research in yoga pants. I don't know. It just seemed to me like it was a little bit filled with horse shit from the start, and it felt like quite a show. And the San Bernardino, comparisons were pretty evident there when they let everyone in the media rummage through their house. They're like, hey, I found his manifesto on the desk. You know, and everyone's like, oh, really? That's where the FBI planted it? Yeah, of course you found it there. So same thing with San Bernardino. They said, we're in a veritable bomb manufacturing facility here. It's like, well, then why'd you let the media in? Why'd you let 22 members of the media all pile in this guy's apartment if you say it's a bomb manufacturing? I mean, frankly, they should have set all the bombs off if they had all the media in there, but that's another story. You wouldn't ever do that if you really thought they were making bombs in there. But of course, this is part of what you get once you legalize propaganda in America to be used on Americans. And we got that in the Smith Modernization Act of 2012 that Obama tried to pass in 2012, but it was rejected outright because it was preposterous. And so he stuffed it in the 2013 National Defense Authorization Act. And what it did is it legalized propaganda to be used in America on Americans. And so what we are getting in the aftermath of this is propaganda.
Ain't that the truth? I mean, even kind of bringing it back to the whole truck thing too. Talk about some propaganda. It was the emails they found, which is how they started, quote, connecting everything and linking everything. But how many stories have you heard where they were like, oh, we weren't able to access this person's phone. We weren't able to get into the records of their text. We weren't able to get into the records of this. But whenever there's something like this, it's always like within a couple hours, they had full access to their email, their text messages, every single component of it. But nobody questions that. But if there's something on the other side, again, we can't get into their phone records. You know, the Verizon won't release us their text messages. But when it's convenient, boom, here it is, all in front of them within an hour.
Isn't that convenient? Yeah, isn't that that's how it always is. It's whenever I see the FBI roll up on the crime scene, my initial thought is, here comes the cover-up squad. They're the ones that, you know, in Vegas, it was Agent Rouse. As soon as he got on the scene, you saw Gillespie get real quiet. He started to change his behavior immediately. So when the feds show up on the scene, that's when all of the disinformation starts. That's why I've always said, whenever there's an event, a big mass casualty event, save anything you can get your hands on in the first 24 hours. Pull those videos down. If you see something that's breaking news, it's on TV and it's just live, that's what you want to pull down. Whenever you look back on any of these events, you'll always find that there was some obscure report that was run in the first day of the event that then ran once and was never seen again. So a lot of times you need to find those and pull them down, because as soon as they have, you know, a lot of times they have these things kind of planned out in advance. So the talking points are prepackaged, but in the event that they don't, then you've got that window of like anywhere from 24 hours, well, really 24 hours to get as much information, off information before the discrediting and disinfo campaign kicks in, where things start to change. Some people you don't hear from ever again, or they get whacked, and other people start to move to the forefront and tell their stories and lead you down a different path. So I could tell as soon as the FBI got on the scene that, and you could see the discrepancies in New Orleans when the police chief is talking about whether or not it's a terrorist event or not. The FBI is saying one thing, the police chief saying something else. It's like, this is what the feds do. They're the cover-up squad, and as soon as they get involved, all of the information that you assume they're collecting, it goes into a black hole that they hold on to. And if they want to release it, they'll release it. And if they don't, then they say that they can't get into his phone.
And it seems like today there's like a different ploy as far as controlling the narrative, because back in the day it was like you can be able to fully control the narrative through media, but nowadays it's like people have access to so many different avenues for this stuff that it seems like their ploy now is that they just try to muddy the waters as much as possible, yes, and then they just skip on to the next event. Because like prime example of this is all the drone stuff that's been happening, and like everybody was creating all of these like crazy conspiracy theories saying like aliens were involved, all of this type of crazy shit. But like I completely am not on the fence with that. I think that this was definitely some type of like government possibly testing out of something, looking for something. But I want to get your opinion on this one, because I know it's something that a lot of people have been talking about lately, and the conspiracies have gotten like so out of hand with this stuff that everybody wants to go towards aliens. But honestly, I think it's a matter of, again, they were trying to do something, and now they're just using the same ploy that they've been using, where they just muddy the water as much as possible, and then they just don't give any answers and scoop on to the next thing. So they just leave it where everybody has these million answers, but nobody will ever figure out what was actually happening, just because there's so much information to try to dig through.
Yeah, and like you said, they move on to the next event so quickly. It's like, hey, like we didn't finish talking about the drones. We still have some questions. They're like, oh, well, sorry, we've moved on to New Orleans. You know, it's like, well, you might have in the media, but we still have questions about that. Like, well, you know, I mean, we're not really. That's so 2024. You know, we're just not talking about that anymore. And so if they can't control the messaging, then they try to distort the truth as much as they can by junk conspiracy, hybrid conspiracies, the storylines that are 90% true, but that 10% that's not true is just enough to throw it in a totally different direction. So, and then when that doesn't work, they just use the benefit of the 24-hour news cycle, 48 hours, 72 hours, if depending on the size of the event. But they know They're going to run through that cycle, and then it'll be on to the next. And people will forget about it because they're busy. They don't honestly care too much. They might want to have, passing discussions about what do you think this drone stuff is, but they'll talk about it while it's happening, but they're not going to talk about it 6 months from now because they will have forgotten about it by then. So you're right. They used to be able to control the narrative completely. Now, once they realize that they've lost control of a particular narrative, then they just try all their other tactics, discrediting people, conspiracy theorist label on people. That still works, surprisingly. And you can see that that it's they have a definitely have a playbook for how to deal with this. They've had a lot of practice. They do these things quite a bit. They know how to manipulate the media. And of course, for those that are like, well, maybe they do a little bit with the media, but like, how are they really that connected anymore? Well, Sean Hannity wears a CIA lapel pin when he does his nightly news show on Fox News, right? So it's still, the intelligence agencies are still there, and I'm not going to pretend like just because the general public is aware that the mainstream media is infiltrated by the intelligence agencies, that they're not going to just stop doing that for some reason. What we've seen recently, though, has been this move from, fine. It's hard for us to control the narrative on television because you don't trust any of us on television anymore because you think we're all lying to you. But what about your computer? What if we were to covertly, infiltrate the alternative media with the mainstream alternative media, which is the term that David Icke has been coining. And then what we'll do is we'll make the news on the computer, and we'll make it look like it's just these guys who are, running their own website or their own podcast or their own, nightly live Timcast show or whatever. And we're going to finance them, sponsor them, bring them into existence, elevate their voice, make the algorithm friendly to them, and let them talk all the things that they want to talk about. But we're going to have our influence in there somehow, and we're going to get them to talk about these issues, but not really cover them in a way that actually does any damage to us. So you can feel that happening. You can see that online now. We get a lot of these shows that have skyrocketed in popularity, and you go, why? And it's like, well, because they're useful to the empire. They talk about things in a certain way, or they appear to get, to really get down in that rabbit hole. But the truth is they never go far enough. And if they ever talk about any of the really important issues, it's 3 years after the fact when it doesn't do any good anyways. Like the people are like, we have some real questions about these vaccines now. We want an inquiry on these vaccines. It's like, well, where were you in 2021 when I was getting thrown off of every platform for asking the same questions? So now you're able to talk about it. So we talk about it when it's dangerous. They talk about it when it's safe and comfortable. And so there's a huge differentiation between the alternative media, the actual one, and this new hybrid mainstream alternative media, which is corrupted and compromised and frankly, as far as I'm concerned, pretty obvious to spot.
Do you remember when PsyOps inside the podcast community was like a conspiracy, and now it's like fully like come into fruition that's definitely a thing that's happening? And I mean, even the people that they try to get on your good side. So like they'll come in and they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm ex-military. I used to work for this organization. I used to work for this organization. And then as soon as stuff starts coming in, they do this thing where they just start gatekeeping. They pretend like they have information that I don't even think they have in the first place. And they'll be like, well, I was talking to somebody the other day and I can't disclose any information on that, but just know that something really big is coming. Like they're using this fear idea that they're like scaring people without actually giving any information. And I don't think they actually have any information. It's a scare tactic in order to get Stockholm syndrome, where people think that they're the person to come to for the information because they're the guy who used to work for the government. So again, I think that like half these people probably didn't even work for the government and they don't actually have any real information, and they're just intentional ploys that are set out to try to draw people in with fear and pretend like they have this privileged gatekeeping information when really they don't have anything, and they're actually sitting out here, trying to throw out a reel and reel it back in, hoping that somebody will give them something to bite on. Then they can pretend like, oh, this was the piece of information I had. I know it's 6 months late, but this is what I had. I can finally tell you guys now because somebody else ended up giving the information because they were just feeding for it.
There's a lot of that going on. I feel the same way. I feel that there's this there's certainly a tactic for this, and you know, you look at somebody like Tulsi Gabbard and you go, oh, she seems pretty cool. She comes out, she surfs, and she talks about how she's anti-war and everything. If she's also part of the psych warfare department of the U.S. Army, she runs it. She runs her segment of it. It's like, so let me get this straight. The one cool chick who's gonna come in government and save the day and is also part of the psych warfare division. You know, excuse me if I'm just a tiny bit skeptical of this cool chick persona. It seems like she's a made for TV good guy who's been rolled out there, but you can't be a good guy when you're part of the Army PSYOP division who's running psychological warfare on the general public. And so I'm skeptical of these people, and I think that that our default mechanism should be set to be skeptical and to never trust any of these people at face value. And when somebody comes out, Shayn Orin, and I'm ex-CIA, and I'm going to break this big story about all that stuff, it's like, I'm sorry, there is no such thing as ex-CIA. Unless you're like a really old guy who's been in it for a long, long time and you finally got yourself out of it because you want to have a decent life at the end. Any of these guys that are young, or the person that Shayn Orin had, the lady that Shayn Orin had on, and she was talking about all this stuff. Oh, it's a great, interesting interview. Oh, it's an interesting interview. Yeah, until she got to the part where she said that you shouldn't look into 9/11 because that's disrespectful and it helps our enemies. It's like, no. See, that's what the CIA would say. So you can't be ex-CIA and also tell me not to look into 9/11 because it's disrespectful. So that is, but again, I think that the general public who isn't maybe as in tune to these sorts of tactics and lies and half-truths, they don't know the game, and they maybe assume that this guy, you know, used to work for the bad guys, but now he's a good guy, and he's gonna out the, he's gonna right these wrongs. He's gonna spill the beans and on what these bad guys in the CIA are doing. Listen, if you used to be in the CIA and you go out and you grow a conscience and start talking about all the horrible things that they're up to, how many examples of those people falling off of buildings do you have to find? Or you're throwing people out of the windows. I mean, they used to throw the ex-CIA director out of the window of a building. So, I mean, you can't do this. These are called limited hangouts. This is when you give, I'm going to give you the goods on all this dirt on the CIA, and you give just a batch of information that people already know.
It's like the UFO stuff.
Leads you nowhere.
It's literally just like the UFO stuff.
Totally.
But it's sad, though. You've gotten to a point now where it's like the counterculture has shifted, because it's like back in the day, the counterculture was the music scene. You had like Jim Morrison, who, of course, like his parents were linked to like the CIA. You have like the Grateful Dead, who also had links to the CIA. But the counterculture was like you had to look at who their parents were. Now it's like everybody caught on to the musicians. They know that they're actually part of the counterculture on this stuff now, especially after, the whole pandemic with like bands like Green Day, Rage Against the Machines, the Foo Fighters, all these bands saying, all right, Rage Against the Machines, but go and get your vaccine first before you guys come and see us. Now that the culture has shifted, now kind of like you're talking about, now you have people where, the counterculture is people like again, all these different like podcasters, all these like mainstream podcasters that were part of the mainstream, and then they shifted over, like Tucker Carlson, prime example. Mm-hmm. But then you look into him, and again, he has ties to like his parents being part of the CIA and everything too. So it's like the facade is still there. It's just the archetype has changed for what they're trying to use to alter the perception of society. They're not using the bands anymore. They're not using that counterculture. The counterculture has become the people that are pro-nuclear family and just rational thinking. So now they're infiltrating that with the same family members, but making them play a different facade on the other end of it now.
Yeah, they've had to pivot. You can't just, pin it all on the rock stars. You gotta get these other podcasters as well.
Don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back. But just a quick reminder, if you'd like to rock some gear for one of your favorite podcasts, creatures, or topics, hop on over to the Open Minds Media store on Etsy and Printify for a wide range of designs with new drops regularly. The most recent design available is the Squatch Country Fear and Loathing parody design, with Sasquatch as Hunter S. Thompson and Mothman as Dr. Gonzo, with artwork by Chris Holm of the Conspire Theory podcast. Welcome back to the show. Now let's dive right in.
And if you and I both have shows, of course, and you understand it's tough to grow an audience if you would love to make that happen. But if you have to do that at the expense of selling out or bringing on guests that you know are disinformation agents because somebody brought them to your show and you said okay, but now you've platformed a guy who's a known
making deals with the devil, so to speak, operator.
Yeah, you get what you get at that point. If you bring these guys on, if you're the Tim Pools of the world and you bring these guys on, and you can't act surprised when you lose your credibility. You just can't, because anybody in our world that takes one look at this goes, why'd you have that guy on your show if you know who he is? Unless you're either it's in your best interest to, or you're being compensated for it, or I don't know. So you're selling your company to another company. Where are they getting their money? Oh, they're getting their money from the Israeli government, and Unit 8200 is on their board and everything. All right. Well, then you're not really selling your media company and walking away. You're becoming part of you're becoming an asset yourself. So I have no respect for anybody that's doing that. And there's a lot of that going on. And I would expect that it's going to ramp up even more, because I guess on the one hand, we can take that as a sign that we're having an impact. If they think that they need to infiltrate that industry, it's because that industry is working. It's starting to show some sort of some sort of power there. So, and they can't have that. So they'll try to send people in to then muddy the waters and make it so that everyone goes, oh, see, those podcasters, they're all just lying. They're all full of shit. So it's a tactic that they use. I would expect to see more of it in the coming years.
And I mean, there's going to be, like you said, more of like a facade and a smarter way of doing this stuff, because they got all the people controlled that were like the wokeism agenda type people, because now they know they can completely mentally manipulate those people. So now they see that there's this big pushback where everybody's going onto the side of being like, a masculine man again, all of this type of stuff. So now they have to try to infiltrate that. And I mean, as they say, everything goes in cycles, like hard times creates create tough men, and then tough men create easy times. The easy times create weak men. It's a cycle. And I'm sure that they're fully aware of that. And they know that we've gotten to a point where we've gotten weak. So now they already know that those people are controlled. So now they got to find a way to manipulate and control the people that are the strong-willed, the strong men. And in turn, they're going to flip-flop this stuff, because, again, that's why they keep pushing this whole idea about anti-wokeism now. Like, it's weird that, on the news forever, all you heard was, like, pro-wokeism. And now it's like, oh, these people are starting their own media production company that's all anti-wokeism. Like, they're sprinkling the crumbs in, because they basically wanted to gaslight these people to the point where everybody was pissed and everybody wanted to fight. And now that they got everybody all boiled up, now they're trying to find a way to manipulate that to do whatever they're trying to do. And I think it's going to be another war, because, of course, the war machine is how the government ends up making money. It's how they smuggle people into the country. It's how they smuggle drugs into the country. And they knew that the people that they'd created aren't the type of people that are going to go to war. So now it's like they got to rile up all the angry people, and they're going to restart this war cycle again, because they tried to go to war with all the woke people, and that just didn't really work for them, because they didn't want to fight like that. And they even had to make basic training a lot less tough in order for them to actually be able to make it into the military. So now we got to flip that back up so we can get this war cycle going, and we can make some money and smuggle in some drugs and people again.
Yep, absolutely. And you can see it. You can see it with these manifestos that they find that it's the Chinese are doing it with drones, or it's the Muslims are doing it. I'm gonna run over these people in New Orleans for Allah. And then what does that do to the people in the bayou? It makes them, we're not going to tolerate any of this Muslims coming in here running over our people, and so next thing you know, you've got them all riled up to go fight a war that eventually will be coming. So yeah, I can see that. Yeah, you can't you can't fight a war with Biden's military because they were too stunning and too brave. They had to lower the physical fitness requirements. They lowered the GED. You didn't have to have you don't have to have a high school diploma. I think you could just have a GED, or maybe they even waived the GED requirements. They took out the part of basic training of Hell Week where, like the banging on the trash cans, get up maggots and on your feet and all that stuff. They took that out because too many of the people were having panic attacks and were wanting to drop out because it was just too much for them to.
They needed a mental health day.
They needed a mental health. They needed one of your mental health. Surprisingly, they don't offer those in the military, and that's what they were finding out. So they took people with criminal records. They took people with job stopper tattoos on their knuckles, and all these things that they had specifically laid out and said that we're not going to take this. In the past, they went back on their word and allowed all this in order to lower the bar to get people in because nobody was joining the military. But you're right. I hadn't even really thought about it that way, because if you want to get the sort of people who would join the military, that's the Republican side. That's the good old boys that'll go sign up and do that stuff. Well, lately they haven't had any appetite to do that. But if you were to maybe create a common enemy and direct it towards those people, then you could get them whipped up into a frenzy and wanting to do something about it. Like I remember the aftermath of 9/11, how many people were like, went full Pat Tillman and they're like, I'm joining the military right now. I mean, I didn't, of course. I thought that was crazy, but I know that was a thing it was either happening to some extent or it was happening a little bit, and the media was playing it up in order to draw people in. But they knew there was going to be a war. They knew that how that an event like that would be perceived by the American people. Once the media got done with them, it'd whip them up into a frenzy, and everyone would be like, we got to go get them over there before they get us here again. Right. And so I can envision a scenario in, 2025, 2026, where a massive event happens in America. It's pinned on our enemy du jour. Maybe that's China. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's Russia. I don't know. But it'll be fake, of course. I mean, it'll be conducted by somebody else as the pretext to get everybody angry and directed towards a common enemy, and then use that to scare everybody into doing what they want them to do.
I mean, talk about sprinkling the breadcrumbs to make this type of stuff happen. You had the whole thing with the military where they were taking like they were taking taxpayer money and they're using that for people that are in the military to get gender reconstruction surgeries. So now you have the whole thing with Trump where he's saying that he's going to get rid of that. So what does that do? That puts out a flag to people saying, look, the military is starting to get tough again. So maybe after Trump comes in, people will actually go and sign up again. So it was like this back and forth ploy that they had to make the government and the people look weak. And in turn, all these people that are the strong-willed ones are sitting back watching like, what has happened to our military? What is happening to this? I can go in and I can do a better job than all this type of stuff. And then they do this slow flip-flop where it's like, oh, look like it's coming back. And then those same guys that are watching this shit saying, I could do that, but I'm not going to join with those types of people. And then all of a sudden they say, all right, we're getting rid of these surgeries, we're getting rid of this. And then it flip-flops. It's all been this long psyop, I think, that it was never that the military got weaker. It was that they intentionally made it look weak so that they could rile people up that wanted to get involved back in it again. And then they knew that they'd come back with an even stronger military than they had before, because then you're going to have all these guys, the mentalities of like, get out of my fucking way, I can do it better. And they're going to come in and they're going to be ready to go wherever the hell they send them, whether it's to go fight ISIS, Russia, something in the Middle East, like who knows, or even a mix of all of them. I mean, at this point, if we're going to talk about World War III, there's got to be a mix of different countries and different powers that are going to be fighting for something. And the question is like, who's going to be on what side? Seems like China and Russia, and then it's going to be the US and, a mixture of a couple other countries.
U.S. and Israel starting trouble all around the globe, as they often do, blaming everybody else for kicking it off. I mean, we really are the worst here. The American Empire is a stain on humanity. When Berwick and I wrote "Controlled Demolition of the American Empire," it was funny because we put it out the Friday before the 2020 election. It became a bestseller on election day. The irony was not lost on us that you would never join, you'd never vote in an election again if you read this book, but also like you'd never join the military if you read this book too. You would see it for what it is and what it has always been, as a funnel to to take poor people without a ton of opportunity. Not everybody that joins the military, but they specifically go after that. We'll give you, you come join us. We'll give you a college degree. We'll help you do all that. So they're trying to focus on a segment of society that they want to join the military. And then once they've get them in there, then they can use them as cannon fodder to go fight these horseshit wars in the Middle East in order to destabilize governments, in order to get your hands on their resources and build pipelines and drill for oil and take the minerals out of the mountains and whatever they've got going on in there. I remember when Pete Buttigieg had that picture of him sitting at his desk in Afghanistan there with his McKinsey and Company / CIA handlers or whatever, and over his shoulder is a big map of Afghanistan. It's the map of all the minerals in there. It's like this very detailed map of all the minerals. It's like, we know what you're doing. Like we don't. You have to be very low IQ to think that we're out there actually spreading democracy. That's like a euphemism for something else that has nothing to do with democracy. And for those that are just starting to figure this out, it's like, hey, I think our intentions in these wars might not be exactly what they said they were. Yeah, we noticed.
I mean, look at the track record on the other side. I had somebody on relatively recently that was talking about like the soldier's perspective of things, or ex-soldier. And it seems like when you get into these people that are anti-government, that are, quote, the conspiracy theorists, 99% of them are people that are ex-military. So like if the rational citizen would look at the track record, that somebody that's actually been through this political system and actually fought for these people is so anti-government to the point where you can't even find them online. You can't track them anywhere. They're off hiding in a hole somewhere. They're off like in the middle of fucking nowhere. Like that should show something. Like, if people are coming out of the military and they were still fun-loving the government, they were like pro-government, all this stuff, it'd be one thing. But everybody coming out on the other end completely goes the opposite direction. So it's like any rational person that can see this cause and effect reaction would see that, like, don't trust the government, man. Like everybody that works for the government tells you not to trust the government. So why would you, who has never been part of the government, trust your government?
I have a good friend, Tony Arterburn. He was a U.S. Army Ranger in Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And he's an anti-war guy, which is funny because he was in 3 wars. And he's like, yeah, I wasn't really your typical guy in the military. He was a power lifter. He's competing in like the military games and reading Bill Cooper books and studying on gold and silver and reading about all this stuff. He was the exact opposite of what you would expect one of those guys to be. And, he got out of the military after that and never looked back and knew as he was in Kosovo as a spotter, looking out, watching as the NATO planes were bombing these areas. He was like, don't ever let anybody tell you that NATO wasn't bombing in Kosovo, in Yugoslavia in the late 90s. He's like, because I was there, I was a spotter. I was watching them bomb. We were calling in coordinates for them to do all of this stuff. He's like, He's like, it's tough to be in those situations and then go back to your bunk and read, Behold a Pale Horse by Bill Cooper. And like, you go, these are some bullshit wars that we're a part of here. So, some people that are in it, those are, you could be in it and be part of it and be a big problem. But you could also be in it almost against your will, come out of it afterwards and say, don't go into that. Do not get involved in that. It's not what you think it is. You're not a hero. You're not saving anybody. You're not spreading democracy or whatever they tell you. That's a timeshare sales pitch for this military freedom. But it is, you're gonna want your money back if you buy it. If you sign up for that. It's nowadays. I mean, it was different a while ago. I think it was different. Every generation, it's a bit different. The relationship between the military and the general public, and of course, Vietnam was bullshit and people were sold that phony war. So it always sort of happens. But lately, it's become so absurdly fake that I just don't know why anybody would want to join the military, given what it's used for. That it is the tool of the American empire, and that is used to oppress people. If it was what people thought it was when they signed up for it, if they thought that they were going to be defending the weak and helping the helpless, then that would be great. But that's like, if you want that, like, go join a search and rescue team in your local community. But like, you're not going to Fallujah to spread democracy. You're spreading depleted uranium that leaves multi-generational birth defects for the people that live in that region. I mean, what you're doing is reprehensible. And so I think that, and some of those guys come back with a lot of guilt about what they did and what they had to do. You know, I mean, they get put in impossible situations and then they're expected to just deal with it. And then the saddest part of it all is when they come back, you know, a lot of these guys that come back for no fault of their own, be put in these situations where they just want to come home and see their mom. You know what I mean? Like, they'll do whatever they can do to protect their buddies next to them, and they don't really want to be here, and they don't maybe have a problem necessarily with the guy over there, except that, you know, I mean, he's shooting at me, so I got to shoot back at him because I got to go home, you know, after this and see my family, and I'm just going to do whatever it takes. I mean, you come out of that, and then what do? Give them help with the VA. And the VA just treats them like garbage and ignores them, and they wind up living on the streets. I mean, one of the bigger stains of the American empire is how it treats these people in the military once they come out of the military. And it's no surprise that one of the biggest threats to the American empire are ex-military who have come out and have seen what's going on. And that's why when they do these role-playing games, I don't know if you remember, like the 2015 Jade Helm and these role-playing exercises that they were doing, they're asking guys. I remember saw this one interview with one of the guys that was running. I don't know if he was running the exercise. He was a part of the exercise. And they said, "What are you guys doing out here?" He's like, "Well, we're running simulations. You know, we're setting up a response to these, you know, this group, this imaginary group in this scenario, this fictional scenario, and we're trying to, you know, get a handle on them." It's like, "Well, what's the group?" It's like, "Well, you know, constitutionalists, America firsters, nationalists, ex-military coming back, you know those guys." It's like, really, in the fictional scenario, the bad guys are the constitutionalists and ex-military. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. But before we get into this break, if you might be interested in joining a growing community of like-minded individuals, then pop on over to the Open Minds Media Telegram, a place to discuss high strangeness, conspiracies, and anything else on your mind. Bizarre and open-minded individuals always welcome. Link to join available down in the show description. And we are back, so let's get back to it. Say they got to protect their assets, man, because half the time everybody forgets the whole concept of like following the money, and that half the time when you're going into these battles, they're also using that money to fund black budget programs. So it's like going back to Vietnam. I've talked to enough vets that they would all say the safest place to be in Vietnam was on the cocaine boats because both sides knew not to shoot at it. And then you get into the stuff in the Ukraine, and it's like, what have we had out of the Ukraine? We've had sex trafficking. We've always had these internet hackers out of the Ukraine. Then all of a sudden, like, you're not hearing much about the internet hackers out of the Ukraine, but there's all these internet hacking, you know, terrorist attacks all of a sudden. It's all about assets, man. They go in, they take what they want, they come back with it, and then everybody else just has to pretend like they didn't know what happened. And I think that's half the problem with the ex-military is that I've talked to a few people that have said things like, you know, we'll go in and we'll save some people, but we don't know what happens to them after we bring them back. And the other side of them say, like, those people end up getting basically sold into sex trafficking. So they trick these soldiers into thinking that they're like freeing this village full of like women and children. Little do they know they just disappear halfway back home, and it's creating more profit for them. So again, once you learn how this crime syndicate works, then of course that's going to be your number one target, that you have to make sure that you get rid of these people that know how your operation works. Like, you see this in every mob movie. Somebody goes to leave the mob, they're trying to leave. What happens to them? They take them out back, they shoot them, they kick them off in the water, and that's the end of them because they know too much. And that's what's happening with these soldiers now. They're viewing them like the enemy because they know too much, because people are becoming aware that the money has to come somewhere for all of these black budget programs.
Yeah, and war is a real big moneymaker for. There's always multiple agendas going on. I mean, it's like, yeah, we're going to fight these people, but while we're fighting in Iraq. Let's loot the museums. Why don't we steal all their gold? Why don't we raid the central bank? Why don't we do all this? So is it a robbery or an invasion? Is it ideological? Or are you just
spreading democracy?
We're spreading democracy. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means stealing all your assets. Anything that isn't bolted down, we're going to take. And even if it is, if it's under your feet or locked up in a mountain, we'll then just stay and occupy the place until we get it all. We'll invade Syria and in northern Syria, we'll take all their oil fields, we'll set up military bases there, and then if you call it an invasion, we'll demonetize your YouTube channel and kick you off the internet because you're not supposed to call it an invasion. We're just there without their permission, with our military stealing all their stuff. But it's definitely not what you think it is.
Never is. Look the other way.
If you notice that it is what you think it is, then we will come after you.
Exactly. Just throw it on another smoke screen, which is apparently what they did with this fog that was happening recently. Just throw it on a quick smoke screen and then on to the next thing.
Yep. Poisonous fog. Yeah, I didn't have that on my bingo card.
Dude, that was one of those weird ones too, where talk about like a psyop as a whole, that it was like half the country was seeing it, half the country wasn't. Nobody knew what information to pick up from it, but the people that were in it were saying that it smells like chemicals, it smells like this. Then the other side's like, oh, it's just when you take a certain picture with your phone, the end of the fog ends up looking weird. So it's like, again, goes back into that mixed, muddied water information stuff that you heard about this for like 2-3 days, and then boom, it was on to all the truck stuff. So it's like, what the hell was going on with this stuff? Like, is it something with like weather control? Is it literally they're just trying to throw down a literal smoke screen in between these events? Or like what was going on with that, man?
Yeah, well, I don't know. We'll find out. It's
or never will.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the military has a long track record of doing this stuff. I mean, we already know about chemtrails. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about spraying bacteria over San Francisco in the 60s, which they did for like just blanketed San Francisco. And they said, well, why did you guys do that? Like, well, we were just testing to see what would happen if we did it. And it's like, okay. And letting biologics go in the New York subway system 50 years ago, just to see how it would work. Well, we wanted to see the flow of air, and well, you could have done that with like colored smoke if you wanted to see the flow of air, but you chose to release biological agents in the New York City subway system. Your government hates your guts and wants you dead. And the sooner people figure that out and really internalize that, then a lot of these things will make more sense. But if you know, because it's tempting to just go, oh, you guys talking about poisonous man-made fog again, you conspiracy theorists. It's like, well, maybe there's nothing to it, but it's not as if we're just making this up, and it's not as if there isn't a proven track record of the U.S. government doing this in the past over and over and over again to the American people. Not just, we know what they did with like the Tuskegee the Tuskegee guys and the syphilis experiments in Guatemala, like taking segment of the population. Let's see what happens with this. But when you are just blanketing an entire city or an entire subway system with poison, I don't know how to interpret that any other way other than terrorism, actual terrorism by our government towards the people. So if you know that is a possibility, because it is a possibility, because it's happened in the past, then it's hard to be dismissive of the fog situation, because it potentially could just be a new version of that, or as chemtrails are a new version of the 1960s spraying that was going on. I mean, we are being sprayed. It's not out of the realm of possibility to have questions about the origins of unusual fog and things like that. So it's, but like I said, a smoke screen, almost like putting the curtain down, right? As set one is open. We're going to move on to set two, and that is 2025, year of the dangerous trucks. A truck drove into, and then you see the headlines, a truck drove into people.
It's the truck-demic.
Right, the truck did it, not the person did it, but the truck just magically drove into it. What's funny is that the Cybertruck actually could have just driven into people if it wanted to, right? They could have been programmed to do that. They weren't talking about that as much because they were talking about the New Orleans truck because it was.
I mean, somebody could
driven
hack
by
one of those
a
things and
human
probably
being.
remote control it at this point too, where like they wouldn't even have to physically be in the car. They could be miles away controlling this thing like a drone if they know how to like properly hack into like a electric vehicle. I mean, you can do that with gas vehicles. I mean, they use that for movies and stuff.
You could, write a story about General Stanley McChrystal and put it in Rolling Stones and then magically get in your car and drive 120 miles an hour into a tree in San Vicente Boulevard. So like Michael Hastings did. So, they've been able to control your car since the Vault 7 CIA leak, where that was 2010 to 2013 was the information that was in there in that dump. And in that data dump, which was a decade old at this point now, they were talking about how they could pilot vehicles remotely. So yes, you can set a Tesla to autopilot and you can set it to summon to a certain point and have it done like that. But the truth of the matter is that they could do that with a fancy Mercedes 15 years ago, and we found out about it because of the WikiLeaks Vault 7 leak. So this technology has been around for a while.
They're just going to scare people from cars altogether and be like, everybody, it's just safer if you walk. Like, cars shouldn't be something that everybody can drive. Like, we should leave it up to the programming the machine to do it because you can never trust human error. Like, I'm sure that'll be the next freedom that they try to strip away, or one of them is push into the self-driving
100%.
cars. And then again, it kind of does this whole concept of like dumbing down society a bit, because that's one less thing they can do. You already have a generation now that like can't drive a stick. So it's just a step by step to make it to a point where like people just can't do these basic fundamental things anymore. And then you just have a dumb society you can completely manipulate at that point, because as they always say, you want people that are smart enough to run the machines but not smart enough to revolt. And I mean, that kind of plays into even like you're saying with the spraying, with all these jabs and everything. It's like it's all a long game. They want people to function for this time being in order to operate the system and make sure the system is working correctly and just be a cog in the system. But as soon as you get to a point where you can't operate as a cog anymore, boom, kick them out, gone. Which is, again, even one of my things I said with the whole original jab and the pandemic that was happening was that it seemed to target old people because, again, old people are the people that don't want on the system anymore. Get rid of them and they're freeing up money on the system for Social Security and all this other stuff. Like,
yeah, we're about to go bankrupt with Social Security. Oh, boy, we have more money for Social Security? No, we're not going to get any more money. What if we had fewer people that we had to pay out? Would that work? Oh, yeah, that would work. Well, why don't we get rid of a segment of the population? Why don't we take the 65 and older and tell them they have to get 2 jabs and 2 boosters? That ought to take care of them. Give it 5 years or so. Next thing you know, we won't have that many people being paid out for Social Security. The problem will just sort of take care of itself in that regard. So, and again, if people think that the government would never do that because that would be too evil, you need to re-examine the role of government. That is what they're there for, is to control us physically, control us mentally. Government, the etymology of the word breaks down to mind control. It is there to control you, to control your mind, to limit your possibilities, to get you thinking that there's only one way to do things, to get you dependent on the system, to be a good little slave that does what he's told to do. And if you do that, you're rewarded. And if you don't, then you're ostracized. And then we can just let society and social conditioning take care of the rest and pressure people into acting and behaving a certain way. It's devious and fascinating. And it sucks that we have to live in a world where all this is going on, because if all that energy was just repurposed into trying to make this place actually better, I just think that the world would be light years ahead of where it is now. But we have to fight all these battles against these people that are actively trying to repress us, destroy us physically, destroy us psychologically, and like death by 1,000 paper cuts. You know, I mean, if the jabs don't detach you from your soul, maybe the GMO food will, or maybe the programming, maybe the blue screen on your phone will throw you into will detach your psyche a little bit more, drive you insane, or just make you a little bit less human. And of course, there's psychological components to this too, but then there's just the physical making you less human too, with brain chips and Neuralink and the like there. And of course they've been pushing this transhumanism agenda pretty heavily. Elon Musk obviously now is one of the faces of the transhuman agenda. And people get, they think, well, transhumanism is like you lost your leg in a car accident and then they gave you like a new leg. And it's like, well, yeah, I guess, but that's part of it. But transhumanism, as the World Economic Forum describes, the fourth industrial revolution is going to be transhumanism, the blending of man with machine. And you go, well, that sounds really fancy. If it's like solving problems, like helping paralyzed people to walk again, everybody's going to be in favor of that. But when you break down where transhumanism came from, the word itself it came out of the 60s with Sir Julian Huxley, who was the head of the British Eugenics Society. And the Eugenics Society was having such a hard time with their reputation because, they're murdering people with their eugenics. It's thinning the herd, it's depopulation. So they said, we've got in an interest to kind of keep this thing going, but take some of the heat off of us, we have to rebrand. And so they changed it from eugenics to transhumanism.
Wasn't that around the same time that Brave New World became mandatory reading within schools? Because once you know that like the Huxley family was connected with eugenics, that book brings on a totally different light, and making people read that in school almost seems like it's a matter of trying to normalize these concepts in a vague way to push this agenda further. And both
Aldous Huxley and his brother Sir Julian Huxley were members of the Committee of 300, one of the most dangerous groups on the entire planet. And it is not accidental. This is the pre-planning, the predictive programming, the setting in place early on this concept of Brave New World, a world in which you'll have
the nuclear family is the savages. Chemically. Which is exactly what they try to further in that. Dude, I read that recently and just trying to connect that in, like out of all these utopian society books that I've read, it seems like that one is linking the most with like where we currently are as a society, because you have the whole idea that there's all the savages that are the nuclear family, and they're looked down upon by these other people that all live in the city, and they all just will have sex with each other, and they all just use all these different things to not actually get pregnant, and then the government controls who gets pregnant. Like, yeah, it's so close to where we're pushing into society now that it's like getting scary at this point, because that is realistically how the left is like looking at society now, is that the nuclear family are the savages, and they're the ones that are just freely going around. Everybody belongs to everybody. Let's just have a good time and, let the government control everything we do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. Once you start to realize that these fictional books were maybe not as fictional as you think. It wasn't clearly it wasn't happening at the time that the book was written. It was set in the future, but it was the future that they desired. It's not some random future that he's just making up. This is a push towards that future. This is wanting society to embrace these concepts and go down that path. And Julian Huxley in his later days moved to Hollywood. He lived like the second half of his life in LA. And was deeply involved in the movie industry as well. And so, some of these ideas are you could push them in books or in the 40s, 50s, and 60s when everyone's reading books. But once it sort of moved into television, then it's like, well, shit, we better take control of the television medium too, because we've got the book component locked down pretty well, where we can make a book popular and then everybody kind of has to read it. But now we have to take over television. So it's no surprise that the Huxleys, or at least Julian Huxley, got involved in television later in his career.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And we are back to the show, so let's hop right in. To talk about predictive programming too, one thing that seems to be popping up a lot, talking about like utopian society type things, is this like whole concept of trying to normalize these like ridiculous concepts. Like one that I've been kind of contemplating lately is the whole concept of like Squid Game. That is this predictive programming? Is this supposed to be mental manipulation to make people think about being in that position? Because of course people need bread and circus. That's how you keep the masses entertained. So if you get to a point where you start looking at a certain faction of society like they're a lesser people to the point where their lives are expendable, and then you start creating these games where people can bet on them, which betting seems to be picking up way more now than it ever has before, where like everybody is betting. Like, I'm kind of curious if these shows like Squid Games are intentionally placed to normalize these concepts, that we're going into this almost like a Running Man type of like future, that they're gonna keep the masses entertained by making them watch these ridiculously brutal games, and in turn, just, again, they can completely control them at that point. They can organ harvest with the bodies at that point. They can do whatever. And the more they keep trying to put this type of stuff in the media, the more people are putting themselves in that perspective and thinking about it. So it's like, the beginning of the game in Squid Game, nobody knows what's happening. And then they tell them money's involved and everybody's into it. But if you normalize this concept of people saying like, man, I'm in debt. If there was only a game that could exist like this, I wouldn't even mind dying. They've already went back and forth with this mentally, and they've already normalize this concept where if anything ever came out where they were like, all right, here's this game, you can win billions of fucking dollars, but everybody's going to die besides that one winner. People have already been thinking about this. You already know that there's a good portion of today's society that will sign up for something like that. And then it just goes back into the whole concept of like the gladiator battles at that point.
Yeah. I mean, a sort of harmless version of this is Japanese game shows. You know what I mean?
Somewhat harmless. They had that one guy who was like stuck in that game for how long? Like 4 years or something like that. And they just recorded this guy like all the time. Like,
poor bastard. Oh my God. Yeah. It's, we joke about the Japanese game shows. They're fantastic, but yeah, it's normalizing this, or maybe it's Hunger Games, or maybe it's, it's Running Man in the 80s, This is how the elite view society, that in their world, this would be totally feasible and totally necessary and normal to make the peons have to fight each other to stay alive, or to, to advance to the next round, or win a bunch of money, or win your freedom, or have your debts erased, or whatever it is. This is the fantasy of totalitarians, that where they can use their power, leverage, and money in order to make people do things against their will, and watch them compete for things like this. Make the poor, throw change, as the old British royalty in India, right? They would throw pennies and watch the little peasant kids fight for them. You know what I mean? Like that they got off on that stuff. It's a weird mentality for these people, these high social ranking members of society that have all the power. And once you've got all the money to buy anything with a price tag on it, you start to get bored and start looking for things that aren't for sale, like people's dignity and maybe even their lives, and to them to get off on watching people compromise themselves in order to get their debts absolved is like, a debt that the system created through usury and lack of education on how debt and financing works, and keeping the poors, poor, by not explaining to them how any of the money systems actually run. You create a society that is really almost like two-tiered. And that, of course, has been their fantasy for a long time, is this Elysium, this floating station up in space where the rich people live and all the poors live down on the prison planet and fight with each other over resources. I mean, they've had this fantasy for a long time. One of the things that is the key, that we talk about world government quite a bit, because they have a very large interest in creating a world government, but the secondary component that's always right there in the shadows is depopulation. It's always this world government would be run so much easier if it wasn't for all these fucking people on the planet. We could just get rid of them. So eugenics, depopulation, it's always an underlying thread that's running through all of these agendas, world government and whatnot. And I think that if once you have the eyes to see it, you can see it really everywhere. But if you don't, and you don't know that this is a concept, your relationship with the government, I think, is much different. And for us tinfoil hat wearers, we're paranoid about everything, not because we're just paranoid people, but because we understand their history, we know what their track record is, we know what they do, we know what they're capable of doing. So we're paranoid for a damn good reason, because we know who we're up against. We know what these people like to do. And the general public is asleep at the wheel, because they have no concept that there's even predators out there. They haven't even figured that out yet. And so, I'm at a point now where I'm trying to wake up people that are close to me, but I'm not really interested in debating people that want to argue about, well, you're a conspiracy theorist about this, or you're go figure it out yourself, or don't. I don't care at this point. I mean, it's we're running out of time. We're getting to a point where we really need to get honest about what we're up against here. I mean, they're building a digital prison around us, and in some cases, we're sprinting into it voluntarily with our relationship with technology and the things that we allow technology to do. We've integrated it so much into our life, but we have to be very careful. And so, people like us and our audiences are going to naturally be a little bit more hesitant and aren't going to rush into these things when they're first presented, like a jab that's experimental, rush to market, unproven gene therapy that never cleared stage 2 trials. I mean, you're going to rush into that, whereas we sit back and wait and go, no, this is a bad idea. These products are dangerous, or this feels like a trap. I've seen this play out before. I've seen this story before. I'm not going to the Capitol on January 6th. I know a trap when I see one. You know what I mean? So the paranoia that we have about the world that we live in serves us well, because it allows us to analyze every new event that's coming and run it through our filter and say, does this check out, or does this feel like they want us to do something? They want us to have a certain reaction to this, and therefore I'm going to be very careful about my reaction, because it feels like they want me to be angry, or they feel like they want me to be fearful, or they want me to feel throw my hands up and say I give up. There's no hope. However they want us to feel, I get suspicious about that, because if they want me to feel a certain way, there's a reason for it, and therefore I'm going to probably resist feeling that way.
Ain't that the truth, man? Man, I feel like today, one of the main problems is that there's a lot of people out there that know something is wrong, but there's too many people with the follower mentality that they're not going to stand up on their own. They have to stand up within a crowd. Otherwise, they're just going to keep their secrets in private, because it's like, I have a couple family members, just to show like the extremes on both this side. I have one that I never thought would ever come up to me and say anything about the news lying, anything like that. And she comes up to me over the holidays and goes, the news lies about almost everything, right? And I'm like, yes, I've been telling you this for years. But on the other side of it, the person that she's married to is a complete victim of the pharmaceutical industry, in the aspect of like, every single time this person goes to the doctors, oh, you might have cancer, go in, do some tests, nothing's wrong. Oh, you might have this, go in, do some tests, nothing's wrong. It's just this vicious cycle of this. So it's like two different ends, that it's like this person is so far into this game and this cycle that there's just no breaking out of it. And then the other side, I don't know if it's because that person's seeing that other person like that, so they're starting to become aware of things, or if it's just a matter of, there's a lot of people, again, that feel a certain way, but they have to stay within safety within the crowd, meaning that they're going to follow the crowd even though they don't agree with it. But if enough of the crowd stands up that they actually do agree with, then they're going to go over with that crowd. It's just, they're never going to stand up on their own, even if they don't agree with this stuff and they actually do see it. They just follow the crowd. They're a bunch of lemmings. They're sheep,
Where did we see this? We saw it during COVID with the masks. When you're in the grocery store and you walk in without a mask, like you own the place, and you're walking the wrong direction down the grocery store aisles where the tape is going one way and you're going the other way. You're not standing on the dot. And you see somebody in the produce section who's wearing a mask, and they notice that you're not wearing a mask and you're walking around without a care in the world. And then they pull their mask down. And then you sort of inspire them, or you sort of, in a way, give them permission. Okay, well, he's doing it, I'll do it too. So you can use this to our benefit as well. And you can show through your non-compliance, it might inspire others that were sort of on the fence. Maybe they want to feel, they feel the way that you do, but there's too much pressure or fear for them to actually come out of the closet and admit that they are a non-mask wearing person, right? But they see you and they go, oh, fuck it. You know what? You're right. And they pull it down. And it's that little extra boost that tells you, hey, this works both ways. You can scare these people into submission, but I can inspire them into coming out of that too by showing them that I refuse to participate in this. And maybe there'll be some people that will see that and say, you know what, you're right. There's no reason for me to do what they're telling me to do just because they're telling me to do it. I feel incompatible. It doesn't feel right. It feels like I should be. It feels like I should be a little bit more brave about this and take a stand. So in some cases, you work on that family member long enough, and then they finally come to you and say, "Hey, did you know the news is fake?" And you go, "Yeah, welcome to the party." I'm talking to you about this in subtle ways for a long time. Glad you're finally here. But and for some people. There's too many reasons for them to ever figure it out. They don't want to figure it out. To understand the truth means to acknowledge that their previous behavior was weak, or that they were believing absurdities, or that they were participating in this massive lie and they feel stupid and they don't want to unpack all of that. And so therefore it's just easier for them to continue committing to the lie and living it. That way they don't have to ever analyze their behavior. That certainly happens quite a bit, unfortunately, and people are cowardly in that regard. But there's no shame in admitting you were wrong. If you got COVID wrong, the best thing you can do is learn from it and never get another one of those things wrong in the future. Everybody's allowed to step on a rake here and there, and get hit in the face with it. But it's how you react after the fact. It's did you double down and say, no, keep stepping on this rake, keep smashing me in the face. I want it because I can't admit that I was wrong. Or do you say, no, this is the last time I fall into one of these traps. For me, that's how I woke up to a lot of this stuff especially on the financial side, was that I was selling homes in Las Vegas during the boom, 2003, 2007 comes along, everything's red hot. 2008 comes and the crash hits, and it's like musical chairs. And when the music stopped, they pulled out all the chairs. I lost 2 houses in that catastrophe. Houses that I watched half the value of my house drop in 1 year. And so I'm like, well, I'm totally upside down on this thing now. It makes no sense for me to keep paying on it. I might as well short sell it to someone, take the hit, and move on. But if I'm going to move on, I'm only going to move on after I figure out and learn from my mistakes. Like, what happened here? How was I working in the industry, dealing with this on a daily basis, and still not see the scams? It's that powerful that it can be right in front of your face. You can be in it and not know you're in it. And that's really embarrassing when you come out of that and you feel just extremely foolish, not to mention really expensive. I don't know how much money I lost on these houses, but it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Enough that you can't help but feel like you set yourself back a fucking decade, And so after that, my decision was I need to understand how money works, because I clearly don't know what's going on here. And that led me down this path of understanding banking and the Federal Reserve and the World Bank and, IMF, and how money is loaned into existence and all of that. And once you start down that path, then then it's like, okay, well, I'll never make that mistake again. And there's no shame in falling into one of these traps, but provided that you learn from it and make sure that it doesn't happen again and again and again. And so, I guess in retrospect, I'm thankful that I learned that lesson when I did, because otherwise it would have continued to haunt me. And I would have made future mistakes because I wouldn't have understood the game that I was playing. And so I think a lot of people probably feel that way too. Wait, am I playing this rigged game? Like you feel like you're at a carnival playing these carnival games. They're like you're shooting basketballs into the hoop and they won't go in because the rim is a little bit smaller than normal. But if you knew that before you started playing the game, you'd never play the game. You'd say, well, this is a scam. This isn't what I'm going to do. So, experience helps. Some people, you got to go through this stuff and make some mistakes and come out the other side. But hopefully we can shave some of the learning curve off of it for people. I always enjoy coming on talking to you about this because I know we can be as real as possible.
Oh yeah. Hold on tight, guys. We're going to take a quick commercial break. And now back to the show. I mean, just to kind of show the manipulation of the system, and sometimes you just have to stand back and get a different perspective on how the system is actually functioning, because most people are put in the position of the system working against them, but in the same turn, you can use it to flip it the other way. Because, I mean, diving into the whole concept of the average person ends up becoming a victim to debt, but then you look at the elites, and the elites basically run their entire business off of debt because then they don't actually have things that they actually have to pay on. So it's like the biggest fear of the average man is the biggest component on how the elite man finds a way to run and create all of this money and wealth. It's just a matter of a different perspective on how you view the system and learning how to manipulate it, because the system is always going to be set up for a way so that these elite individuals have ways to get around things. It's just a matter of they keep that amongst themselves, and you have to figure out how to manipulate that stuff to make it work in your favor. But, most people are scared to break their paradigm. I mean, even going back into, the people that don't want to admit to, their mistakes maybe. I mean, even on the other side, I think it could even be a component of once somebody admits that this one thing was a lie, then it opens up a whole can of worms of, was this a lie? Was this a lie? Was this a lie? Was this the lie? And it's not even necessarily that they're scared to admit their own mistakes, but rather like they're afraid to open up that can of worms to dive back on how much they've been dealing with was a lie. So they'd rather just sit in the lie or, sit in the matrix and eat the fake steak rather than actually be aware of what's actually happening around them. They just want to live in this fake bliss.
And I understand that. I don't respect it, but I understand it. I think that I understand why some people do that. It's a lot to unpack, especially if you've spent your entire life feeling a certain way. For someone to come and tell you that it's all been a giant lie is a lot to deal with. And for some people, they just say, you know what? I'm not prepared to have to figure all that out at this age, at this point in my life. I'm just content with the scenario that I know, even if it's fake. I know how to operate within it, and I'm just going to stay in there. And anything to the contrary, I'm going to reject out of just immediately because it's a threat to my current existence, my paradigm. And if you break it, then I have a lot of extra work to do to sort of figure out what reality is. And frankly, I don't have the time, energy, or desire to do that. So therefore, I'm just going to live in denial for the rest of my days. I understand why people would make that calculation, but I don't think you're living an authentic life if you are denying reality simply because you don't want it to be true. I think you have to be honest about the world. And if you're unwilling or unable to get honest about it, then when you get caught up in one of these scams or one of these frauds, or you get suckered into taking a bunch of vaccines because the television told you and Fauci told you, and I don't want to hear any complaining. You had the opportunity to break out of your conditioning and you chose not to do it because you thought it was going to be too hard. And then you fell into a trap of signing up for a bunch of medical experiments because somebody told you that you were going to die, even though it was a 99.98% survivability rate.
Do it for your brothers. 80. Do it for your community. Sounds pretty communist to me.
For sure it does. Yeah, exactly. This is your vaccine isn't for you. Your vaccine is for me. It's like, well, I have bad news for you. My vaccine isn't going to protect you because there's never going to be one that I'm going to take. And I think that there's some people out there that are never going to figure it out. And it's not I don't have the capacity to try and make them figure it out. I do the best I can of the books, podcasts, and the brand new acquisition of activist posts that on January 1st, I bought Activist Post. So I now have a news component to my operation here. So I'm doing my part to get the information out. If you're unwilling or unable to grab it, then that's on you. But my conscience is clear because I put this information out in what I think is a reasonable, easy to sort of digest way. I think I can explain some of these concepts in a way that makes sense to people that don't have a hardcore geopolitical background. And I've got different formats. If you like reading, I got a book for you. If you like audio podcasts, we've got that. If you like articles, now with Activist Post, we've got that. So we've got you covered. So nobody's going to accuse me of not doing my part to spread this information. God, at this point, it's out there. It's just, do you choose to get yourself educated about this or not? And come in for whatever reason gets you in. You know what I mean? If you like speculating about crazy shit, like come on in for that. But that'll lead you eventually to the medical industry, and it'll lead you to the military industrial complex. It'll lead you to all these things. So whatever is the little topic that gets you to start scratching your head going, I think they might be keeping some important information from us about this topic. Oh, really? You think so? Well, guess what? If it's not just this topic, it's a bunch of other topics too. So whatever gets you to the party, I'm in favor of it. But I think that people have a responsibility once they figure this out, once they come to this information, okay, understand it, but then like talk to people close to you, talk to those who are receptive to this and see if you can help them, understand the world that they live in just a little bit easier, because it's really disorienting when you think you know what's going on in the world, only to find out that it's all a gigantic lie. That can be really troubling for people. So you kind of have to ease into it. And so, whatever gets you to the party. For me, 9/11 was what got me in. There was a huge problem with that story. But you can't study 9/11 and then not get all those tangential rabbit holes that are like, right there that connect to it. And you go, well, I'll look into this, and what is directed energy, and what is this, and what is Mossad, and what, and next thing you know, you're like, holy shit. Like, I thought I was just learning about 9/11. Next thing you know, I'm dealing with international wire transfer clearing houses that I never thought I would have any interest in learning about. And now I have to know about that because that's a huge component of this other story. And that's where you see things that are all sort of connected to one another. So if you're new to this, you're just waking up, what took you so long, but we're glad you're at the party.
It's always better to be late to the party than never show up, I guess, at this point.
For sure.
And honestly, one thing that I've been kind of...
Don't stay for the after party. Yeah. Don't stay for the after party.
One thing that I've been kind of throwing at people, kind of like what you're saying with the whole, like, find your little thing that you're interested in. You always have to deal with the people around you in your close family that you deeply care about that may not actually like get into this stuff. And one little thing that I've been kind of trying to do lately, it seems to work pretty well, is you just got to drop little breadcrumbs, because if you come at somebody full force and you're trying to tell them about all these conspiracies, chemtrails, all that kind of shit, those people aren't going to listen. They're going to completely push back. But if they start having these moments of questioning and you notice that and you just drop a little breadcrumb in, and each time you notice one of those, then you might actually end up breaking down the wall to somebody that you really care about. But it's a matter of, like you said, you got to scratch the surface in the little spots that catch their interest. So, if they keep going to the doctors and they're like, why do I feel like shit every time I go to the doctors? Then you start dropping into like, oh, look at what's in medication. And have you ever noticed how every medication has a giant line of side effects after each thing, and then you have to take another medicine to get rid of that? Like, kind of weird, right? Just leave these little breadcrumbs here and there, and then next thing you know, they'll start waking up to these things.
And with the breadcrumbs, make sure there's a question mark at the end. Hey, what do you think of this? Hey, what do you make of this situation here? Well, that I've learned is a much better tactic than just monologuing on somebody, some poor bastard. You make it a dialogue, right? A two-way street here. You say, well, what do you think about this? And get them. It does a couple things. First, it gives you a sort of an understanding of what their baseline knowledge is of a certain event. And also gets them to talk about. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with people where I've asked them questions about something, and they start to they say, "Well, the answer is this," and they get halfway through answer, and they realize that their answer doesn't really make much sense. It's kind of disjointed, and it's the first time they've ever verbalized it. They've never had anybody ask them the question. They've never had to answer, what is this? What is going on? What happened on 9/11? What do you think happened? Do you really think, what do you think would cause a newscaster to say that a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the crime scene at the foot of an FBI agent? Have you ever heard of a story? They go,
kind of weird. The Patriot Act strips rights, right? Kind of a weird name to name something that takes rights away, right?
Right. And if you get them that sometimes, for one, it's not, you sit down, I'm going to tell you how it is, and then blah, blah, blah. Nobody likes that. Nobody likes to just get dumped on with all this info. But if you ask them questions and get them thinking about it in a way that's participatory, then it doesn't feel like a lecture. It feels like a conversation, which it is. And then in that conversation, within that, you can ask more questions, get them to start thinking about things that maybe they haven't thought of before. That's my advice based on me doing it all the wrong ways before.
You and me both.
I've done it every wrong way you can do it. So I say that as somebody with a little bit of experience stepping on my dick over and over again, trying to have these conversations, watching the table turn on me when I
turning into a rant, and then everybody's just looking at you while you're just going and going. You're like, all right.
You don't want to do that. It's not good. You're not gonna convince anybody. Not that, there's ways to go about it and ways to not. And I've done it every way you can do it. And I'll tell you right now that the best way to do it is to make the person feel like they are involved in the conversation, and make it a conversation, and make it not a diatribe.
Ain't that the truth? Stay tuned, guys. This is our last break. But if you guys enjoy the show and think I deserve it, please leave a review or rating for the show on iTunes or Spotify. Your continued support is what makes this show possible, and your opinions go a long way to help the show grow and improve. So thank you. Now back with that deep conversation you crave. Then I guess this is a perfect spot, because I always like to wrap up the show with words of wisdom. So if there's any words of wisdom that you might want to bestow on the listeners today, man, what might it be?
Oh, listen, we are so lucky to be. I spent the summer and fall of 2024 in Las Vegas with my mom, as I came into town to be with her when she was going to get a medical diagnosis. I flew in, and the diagnosis was stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and they gave her 90 days to live. So I never left. I stayed there. I came in thinking I was going to stay for a week, and I stayed for 98 days until she died at home with me there. And I saw it with my own eyes. And I came out of that realizing, none of the money in the world matters. It doesn't. If you have a good, comfortable sort of place, if you're someplace where you like to be, that's great. You don't have to have $1 million to have that. What's important is your reputation, the people close to you, your behavior, how people treat you, how you treat other people. Getting caught up in the rat race and trying to make a bunch of money just to prove a point to somebody. I saw what happens when you're on your deathbed, and the only thing you want is what's immediately in your vicinity. You want your family, and you want to feel comfortable. So we're all going to check out of here at some time, Make sure you live your life the right way, and don't forget the little things. I had, I learned quite a bit. I put out my 500th episode of Macroaggressions is called What I Learned After 98 Days in Las Vegas. I put it out a couple weeks ago, and it was just my experience after going through that and what I had to face. And it was a real perspective changer for me. And then I came out of that with, she passed away on the Sunday right before the elections in November this year. And I came back home and really started to finalize the Activist Post acquisition that we were in the process of. We were rebuilding that website. And I left Las Vegas feeling like I've seen that's all my fears were realized in one spot here. And if I can get through that and with my, with my mind intact and my, in my soul, then I was going to be bulletproof going forward. And so I'm optimistic about 2025. I miss my mom. I wish she were going to be around to see this. I had a very, very close relationship with her. But I have this Obi-Wan Kenobi sort of, vision of like, she will become more powerful than I can possibly imagine and be sort of riding shotgun theoretically with me as we move on, as I move on into the news business and take this to the next stage. So, my advice to people would be appreciative of what you have and your family members that you've got, the ones that will still talk to you at this point, and remember what's important.
Man, and I definitely recommend anybody go back and listen to that episode, because I'm sure that was a really, really hard episode to do, but you got a lot of really good points out, and I think you changed a lot of people's perspectives by doing that episode and actually kind of bringing it full world into it. So I just want to say thank you for sharing your story, because it tied into a lot of stuff that I had dealt with in my personal life with another family member and stuff. But I know that during that, you also mentioned that you had help from somebody who had written a book. So I figured before we do your links, or if you want to throw it in with your links, just because you brought up the episode and everything, maybe you can even throw out where you can find that book and what exactly you'd find in that book too.
Soiled Linens and Loved Ones was written by a lady named the letter K, Rose Copeland, and you can find it on Amazon. And that her name's Katie. Katie was the hospice nurse who came to every Tuesday and Friday when I was taking care of my mom, and she wrote that book. She as a how to care for your for family members, and I bonded with Katie. She sat me down on the couch the first time I met her, and she said, "This, I'm going to explain to you how this is going to go," and she gave me a little bit of a roadmap as to for what I would expect, and she. And so when I recorded that episode, I made sure to mention that book, and I said, I would never ask people to go out and buy my book. I mean, I hope they will, but I definitely would ask people to go out and buy her book. So if you're somebody that wants to do something nice for a person and get a fantastic book out of it, by the way, this is no charity case. I mean, the book is really well written. I've got it on my bookshelf. It's called Soiled Linens and Loved Ones. And you'll know you've got the right book because the cover is it's a funny, like a portrait of like a child, like a 3-year-old kind of, one of those portraits you would take like at the mall someplace, and the kid is like kind of screaming at the camera. I think it's Katie as a baby. It's a funny picture to put on the cover of the book, but she was an angel, and she was. I appreciated her honesty. She didn't sugarcoat anything with me, and she said, this is how it's going to be, and this is how we're going to expect it. And my mom loved her, thought she was fantastic, and she watched that deterioration. That's her job, is to watch that. And it takes a real strong person to do that for a living. So any of you out there who have become caregivers, who either voluntarily or involuntarily have been forced into that, I feel your pain. It was forced upon me as well. I took the job seriously, and I learned a lot about myself in the process. And that's part of the reason why I feel the way I feel about 2025 is, I feel I have my optimism in that, worst case scenario is that you're dead. We're all going to be dead. What do you do in the time between now and then? That's what matters. How do you conduct yourself? What's your behavior like? What's your reputation? How do you treat other people? If you do everything in a manner in which you can live with, that's heaven. You know what I mean? I don't know about this going up into the clouds. I don't know about the pearly gates and being reunited with your loved ones. But if you leave this world and people think of you in a positive way, that's a bit of heaven, right? And if you leave this world like George H.W. Bush and everybody thinks that you're one of the worst human beings of the 20th century, that's a form of hell. Mm-hmm. And and I learned quite a bit about life and myself and what matters and what's important, really. And I wish I didn't have to go through it, but I think the worst crime would have been to go through it and not learn anything in the process of having to deal with it, because it's heavy duty. And if you can make it through something like that, you feel like you've got everything pales in comparison after that.
And I mean, especially after all that, like you kind of said, you feel like you have your Obi-Wan ghost, or like, your little guardian angel sitting on your shoulder while you're doing all your projects and everything. So, I mean, at least on the positive side, it's just more of a push to do good and to live a moral life and to try to just wake people up to all these different concepts and everything you're working on. And I guess with that, of course, you got to let everybody know where they can find your podcast, where they can find your books, where they can find any projects you're working on. Because I know you have a lot of different stuff you're working on currently, man.
I've certainly created far more work for myself than I should. But yeah, I was in the process of writing my fourth book when this situation started in Las Vegas, and it got put on the back burner. And so macroaggressions.io is the website. You can find everything that I'm doing over there. That's a pretty easy spot. But also activistpost.com. Activist Post has been a independent news website for the past 15 years. They approached me this summer and asked if I would be interested in taking over and buying it from them and continuing the process. And that's what's happened. We rebuilt the website. It's up and running. It relaunched on January 1st. It's a great place for you to go to find news. And if you find something that you like there, just do me a favor and share it with people close to you and get the word out and help Activist Post to continue its glory. It's one of the 2016 Disinformation 200 websites that got demonetized and deranked and all that stuff, along with Free Thought Project, Zero Hedge, and WikiLeaks, and 100.
Where it has a badge of honor.
For sure. As far as I see it, it's the badge of honor. I think other investors would look at that and go, I don't really know if I want the site with that much baggage. I'm like, well, you call it baggage, I call it gold. You know what I mean? I think it's fantastic that it was demonized like that. That's the best thing that could happen to something like
that's
that.
That's how you know you're onto something.
Exactly. So I encourage people to just take a look. In corp, I'm not saying make it your only source of news. I'm just saying go bookmark it and check it over the course of every day for a week and see what you think. The articles are fantastic. I'm curating all kinds of different from a variety of different sources. And I'll tell you what, it also works fantastic on mobile, which is really important. We didn't build an app for it because I can't centralize the control into an Apple store or into a Google store, but and they won't let you have one for that anyway. Like Zero Hedge didn't get there, never could get an app. So if you're searching for it on mobile, you're just going to have to bookmark it like you do on a PC or something like that, and check it out and see what you think. I think it's a fantastic place for people to get relevant information. So, and thanks for having me on again. I always appreciate our chats.
Dude, it's always a pleasure, man. I'll make sure I include all the links down in the show description so everybody can find it quick and easy. And man, I thoroughly enjoy these conversations we have. We need to make sure we don't go so long this time, because with the way the world's going, man.
40 episodes.
Yeah, and we have to do every couple months, man. We could probably still wouldn't be able to cover everything at this point, but
yeah,
we'll make sure that we do it more often, man. But again, I always appreciate you coming on, man, and I appreciate all the work you put in, all the different time you do with all your projects. And to anybody that hasn't listened to Macroaggressions, highly recommend doing it. It's been one of the podcasts that I've been listening to since I started listening to podcasts, and I know you guys will thoroughly enjoy it if you guys enjoy this show. And help us all fight the algorithm battles. Don't forget to leave everybody 5 stars over here.
Yeah, I'm kidding. We need that help. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Shayn.
If you enjoyed today's episode and you want to show some love, smash that follow icon or share this episode with a friend and leave a review or rating to help me fight this algorithm battle. And if anyone would like to get in touch with me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can email me at inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com or through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the ones I am the most active on. Or you guys can also get a hold of me through the submission form, and that is available right at the top of the link tree. Or you guys can also get a hold of me through the hotline. You guys can text or call that, leave a voicemail, whatever you guys want to do. And that number is 313-364-1551. And if you have some free time, don't forget to check out the awesome friends of the show, IKNOWSQUATCH, Snarly Out Natural Products, Cryptoteeology, and Big Ape Threads, and our other friends with affiliate links, Dimension Devices, Oregon-ite, and Sticker Mule, with additional discounts and credits available. More info is available down in the show notes, of course. And every single thing that I mentioned, including those, is all available on the link tree, which again is available down in that show description. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Hope today's episode has connected some dots in your own reality, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey, with a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in